Good afternoon, everybody. It's your pal Martin the Melon here. Hope you're going well. Just going outside after picking up my usual medication and blood tests. Because, getting older, I guess, and you need to start getting more blood tests every now and then. Well, not every now and then, just every 6 months, just check up on things. So, I'm going to talk to you today about my trip to Algeria that happened last week. I had been wanting to visit Algeria for years. I can clearly remember back in 2012, I was writing to the Algerian embassy in Canberra, and I basically said, look, I'm a British citizen, but I also live in Australia, and I'm also an Australian citizen. Can you give me a Algerian visa, my British passport? And they said yes. But a trip to Algeria didn't really materialize because of the really, I wouldn't say harsh visa requirements, but let's just say it's a lot of paperwork involved. So the years went by, and basically the only North African country I'd been to was Morocco, and then until 2 years ago I went to Egypt for a 3-day trip, and then I marked Tunisia as my 100th country at the start of 2024. Now, I've been friends with this man called John, who I first met in Baltimore when I stayed at this place he was living in 2010, and we kept in contact through Facebook, and then 6 years later he visited my father in Cairns and myself in Sydney. So I always kept in contact with John, and then this year I got to meet up with John and his new wife Kelly on the Isle of Man, which is an island that I've not been to yet. And then because they're living in Dublin, I paid them a visit a few months later. So John basically had persuaded me that we should do a trip to all 6 permanently habitable continents. 7, Antarctica doesn't really cut it that much because there's never really a permanent population there. So let's just stick with 6. So we've been in North America, we've been to Europe and Australia. So he was like, what do you think for Africa? And I had 2 options. I basically had like either Cape Verde or Algeria. I went to Cape Verde this year, and then we decided at the end of the year that I would go to Algeria before my 40th birthday, just to make it my 120th nation. So John decided to tag along. So we planned it, we booked it, the tickets, and then all we had to do was go on for the visa. Now the visa situation in Algeria, yet again, it's complex and there's a lot of paperwork involved. You need your passport, 2 passport photographs, you need the application form filled in twice, you need also 2 sets of photocopies of every page of your passport, including the blank ones. Now this procedure cost me £20 sterling at a Ryman photo shop in Waterloo. When I went there, this woman told me she'd already been to Algeria and she'd said she never ever had to experience this requirement. Apart from, a fuckload of photocopies, I also needed to make a hotel booking. So I found Afric Hotel, booked there for 3 nights because it was only going to be like a 4-day trip. And also, John, my friend, booked the same hotel. So I applied for my visa in London and I got it 2 weeks later, and then John got his visa after a 2-week wait as well, even though he had to travel abroad and come back to get the sticker put in his passport. So we both got our visas issued, 85 quid for me in London and about, I think, 80-ish euros for John in Dublin. So to get to Algeria is quite cheap because Vueling fly there from Barcelona. They fly to Algiers and Iran. So we decided for 44 quid I would fly from Barcelona to Algiers for a 4-day trip. Vueling has good connections with Barcelona, so I went from Gatwick to Barcelona, spent less than 24 hours in Barcelona, which is a city that I never ever visited before. I'd been through the airports. And then Saturday morning, we both flew to Algeria. That was my 120th country, and that was John's 110th country. So upon arrival, we just had to fill out a card and basically the guy was like, "You have a visa?" I'm like, "Yeah, got the visa and all." So, but it's kind of funny how like I'm really running out of pages of my passport. So he stands me in, and we just get waved through the customs check. So I arranged for a guy to collect John and myself up from the airport to take us to our hotel, which was cost 17 euros. There's actually a train you can take that's a bit of a walk from the airport, because the airport has its own like train station, which you can actually get to the city of Algeria for about 80 dinar. Now, one thing you gotta know about Algeria is the currency. You will not find currency exchange shops like you would do in Tunisia or Morocco or Egypt. You could still take money out with your card, but I tell you one thing. If you take money out of your card, not only will you get the fees and like crap, but you also get really a bad rate, because the currency exchange rate is like €1 to 150 Algerian dinar. So if I'm holding this up, this is like 6.50. It's roughly €7. On the black market, you can get from 180 to about over 200 dinar euro. So on the way into the hotel, I exchanged 50 euros just as a start off, and then also John also exchanged 50. So but then the next day in Iran, John was able to get an exchange rate of over 200, and also I exchanged 40 euros. So in total, I only had about 90 euros in local money. And basically, I believe I probably would have spent roughly 70 euros on a 4-day trip on just food and transportation, drinks and meals and whatnot. So the driver, nice man, changed the money at 180 dinar. It's a good rate, even though a lot of Algerians and abroad would have basically said, "Oh, you should have actually just got 200 euros." It just stuff like that, is complicated, but there's nothing really against changing money in the black market. But one thing I didn't notice is that it's not illegal to export the Algerian dinar as it is to export the Tunisian dinar. So John and I arrived at the hotel about 10 o'clock. I had made a booking on trip.com just to get my, because you needed to have a hotel booking to secure the visa. And then John used Hopper. So when we arrived there, the guy at reception was like, "Oh, Mr. Anthony, yes, your booking is fine," but he said to my friend John, his booking was cancelled, and there was like no notification. My buddy John had paid for this in full. So the owner was suggesting that John was to stay in the same room as I was. I was expecting just to have like basically a one-bed room, because John and I would be in separate hotel rooms, because we're friends, nothing all. So the owner basically is like, "Okay, pay me 2,000 for John to stay in your room, Martin." And then so we basically just went upstairs, and John was on the phone to Hopper, basically asking what the hell had happened. And basically, Hopper has a connection with Expedia. So my buddy booked on Hopper, and his money, I guess, went to Expedia, but didn't go to the hotel, which is just really very iffy when you use third parties things, which I think sometimes it's right if you book straight with the hotel and send them the money, but other times it's like you use Booking, Trip, Expedia, you kind of get a discounted rate on using that. So after 2 hours on the phone, John basically got a reservation at the ABC hotel, because that was the only hotel he really wanted to stay at. There were other hotels I was trying to recommend, but basically they had really crap reviews, and even hotel staff had stolen items from tourists. So iffy how John and I basically had to stay in different hotels a kilometer apart. On our first day, we took the metro train up to visit the tall monument to the martyrs, because Algeria had a long war against the French after World War II. And this war was quite significant because the French had colonized Algeria for over 100 years, and so many French people had settled in Algeria. But then all of a sudden, like, when Algeria became independent, all the French and the Pure-Noirs all just left. And so we all had a good, like, half an hour looking around the museum, understanding what had happened in war, learned how the French even used the guillotine to execute Algerians. And it was really horrible because a lot of France's other colonies didn't really put up like an armed resistance. I remember Morocco became independent in 56 and Tunisia became independent in 56. But when they had this referendum in 58 and they asked all the colonies, like, do you want to be more part of France or what do you want? Guinea was the only one to basically say, F you France, we're going to become independent. And then France took everything away from Guinea. As for local transport, we didn't take any taxis whatsoever. We basically just like walked all over the place. And we took the metro line here and then. The metro line is only about 50 Algerian dinar. It's not even a euro. So, but it's only one line and it doesn't go to the airport, but it's really good and I would kindly really recommend it. As for food and drink, it's basically a mixture of French and Arabic. I remember my breakfast at the hotel was a mixture of French, like pastries and some Arabic sweets, and just really continental. Because my buddy's dietary requirements, he's gluten and dairy intolerant, we were basically just eating like lots of shawarma. Like shawarma without the bread, and also I had a few shawarmas as well, even though I had a disastrous shawarma experience in Eritrea. I think the best place in the world to eat shawarmas is North Africa and the Middle East. Don't try to have a shawarma in other parts of Africa, you may get sick. But I'm not being stereotypical, that was just my experiences, but I've had food poisoning from diners in Birmingham and Eritrea. On our second day, we took a train from Algeria to Oran, which took about 5 hours. We really wanted to take this early morning train at 5:50 in the morning, but locals were like, don't take this train, it's going to be crappy, it's going to be slow. Pay a decent amount of money for first class, and we did. We had like 2 first class tickets, which was roughly about €7 each, on a 5-hour train trip from Algeria to Oran. Now we didn't stay overnight in Oran because it was pointless, because both John and I had already paid for accommodation in Algiers, so I thought, well, what's the point of paying for more accommodation when you've already paid for 3 nights? So we just had a look around Oran. We found this mosque that was originally a synagogue during the French colony days. But unfortunately, this mosque was under repairs and like a republic, so it was a shame. And we had a good seafood meal at a really nice restaurant with a really fancy waiter who even went far as vacuuming the table of the crumbs afterwards. I mean, that's really how we say silver service, really high quality stuff. Yes, and then we took the 5 o'clock train back to Algiers, and we got back around 9 o'clock in the evening. Then on the Monday, we basically just did a walk up north to Algiers. We tried to visit this European cemetery, but the guy basically said, oh, it's closed. But then we eventually went back to the same cemetery on our last day, and we got shown around, and we were even taken to the Jewish section, which was really lovely. There was a French actor who died abroad, and he really wanted to be buried with his father in Algeria. So about 10 years ago, his body was returned to Algeria and buried next to his dad, which was a really beautiful thing. But also in this one cemetery, we found there was the tomb of Madagascan royale, because they were sent to exile in Algeria in the 19th century, and that's where they died. But their bodies weren't returned back to Madagascar until decades later. Yeah. So, and we just saw a lot of really good sights around Algeria. We saw, we didn't go to inside the church, but we noticed this big cathedral up in the mountains, up in the hills. We also went past a mosque in Algeria that was also a synagogue. We went to the museum of Ali Lapointe. Ali Lapointe was an Algerian resistance fighter who, instead of surrendering and getting his head chopped off, he hid in the Casbah, and the French blew up the Casbah. And to this very day, you can still see the ruins of the place he lived in. And this museum basically just explains the life and death of Ali Lapont, one of the famous Algerian resistance fighters. So going back home, we basically took a train from the train station that went to the airport. Only cost about 80 Algerian dinar. And then we had to check in the old-fashioned way because Vueling doesn't allow online check-in for the flights from Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Lebanon, and Guinea. No, what was it? The Gambia. Yeah, you have to basically just do it the old-fashioned way. And also, we didn't exchange the leftover of our currency because I tend to keep some of my currency. I send my currencies to my niece and nephews in Australia. I always tend to give currencies to my South African friend. So, up and all, it was a good 4-day trip to Algeria, my 120th country, and John's 110th country. If I had more time, I'm not really too sure. I had no really interest in wanting to go into the Sahara because I'd already been to the Sahara last year when I went through Mauritania. But one thing's for sure is that Algeria doesn't really have like a welcoming visa policy, because the only countries you can get to Algeria visa free are a few Muslim Arab nations, and even a country like Malaysia can visit Algeria visa free. Interesting, don't know why. But worthwhile, it is worth getting the Algerian visa if you want to look around northern Algeria, like just stick to the coastal areas. Because there's hardly any tourists, although I did see a lot of European or French tourists just looking around, but you won't get bothered that much, unlike in Morocco and Tunisia. I'm not being stereotypical. I mean, yeah, you know, you go to foreign countries, you stand out like a sore thumb, you tend to get like bothered here and then, but it's the only one time John and I were bothered was this basic guy trying to sell us like tissues, and basically I just had to say to him, La shukran, like means like no thank you, just trying to be like nice, polite, rather than being rude and discouraging to those type of people, because they're trying to, you know, like, their salaries is probably only maybe 100, 200 euros a month. It's horrible. It's yeah. So in all, had a really good time in Algeria. I did bring my video camera with me, but I wasn't really inspired to let's say, you know, make a fully fledged vlog. I basically just made small clips on Instagram around the Casbah here and there. And it was basically I got locked out of Facebook a day before my birthday, so that's really shitty to me because that's 18 years worth of materials just gone like that. So I had to like restart up my Facebook thing. But anyway, I recommend, if you want a really great country to visit on the cheap, not far from Europe, Algeria, go for it. I mean, there's too many tourists going to Morocco, Egypt, and Tunisia. Give Algeria a go. But which just leaves me with Libya. Libya, I don't think Libya will ever be like, you know, its neighbors. My godmother went to Libya Gaddafi area. But since Gaddafi's overthrown, there's no independent tourism, so that's why you have to be on tour guides. I would love to go to Libya, a drop of a hat, because my great uncle fought there in World War II. And also, like, Libya and Syria are the last two countries in the Mediterranean Sea that I haven't visited yet. So anyway, this is Martin the Metalhead, over and out.